We're absolutely delighted to welcome to the stage Maya and Charlotte.
We'd just like to start by also acknowledging any First Nations people here in the audience today. We respect the Wiradjuri people of the Kulin Nation who walked this land before us. We'd also like to acknowledge any LGBTIQ elders who kind of paved the way for our rights and our freedoms. So I'm Maya and this is Charlotte, and I thought I'd just start by saying that, we actually began our journey in university because when we were 18 or 19 or something, we walked, I was like a week late or something coming in because I'd been traveling, and I walked into the classroom and I saw Charlotte, and she was raising her hands to all the questions, and she was the smartest girl in the room. She was also wearing a hot pink tropical onesie, which really solidified the friendship. So we just wanted to start today, I suppose, we'll talk about the genesis of the film, where it came from, and I suppose what it's like to grow up with same-sex parents. We're going to talk about crowdfunding and how we got this idea off the ground. Then I suppose about how we're using Gayby as a tool for social change in this country. So I suppose just as a start, over the last few years, I think we can all agree that we've been having this really ugly debate about marriage equality, and our leaders and politicians have brought children and families front and centre to that debate. I can't tell you how many times I've heard the argument that marriage is about having kids, and kids deserve a mother and a father. But even though gays can't marry, they've been having kids for generations already. So I'm 27, my mums have been together for 30 years. This is really not a new idea. So I think, we just felt that the debate was missing one voice, and that is of the kids, who are a new demographic in our schools and in our society, and they have a voice as well. So that's sort of what Gayby is about. I think what's really exciting is that due to amendments in government policy, also developments in reproductive technology, and the sure shifting of public opinion has meant that we are literally in a Gayby boom. There are kids all over the world, and for the first time in LGBTI history, if you are on that rainbow, you can expect to have a family. When my grandmother was incredibly horrified when my mum came out, because she was like, this is the end of the family line, we're never going to have kids or grandkids, and that's just not the case today. So it wasn't uncommon when I was growing up for people to make all sorts of judgments about me, and I can't tell you how many times I was told that I was different, and usually with that unsubtle subtext that difference was bad. They'd ask, do you miss having a dad, and are you going to be gay because your parents are? And for years in my defence, I'd answer, no. My family's normal, it's just like yours. We're the same. And I'd talk just about how perfect my family was, because when I mentioned any disruption or conflict, I knew it would be blamed on my parents' sexuality. Us older queer spawn like to refer to this as poster child syndrome. The notion of always having to put on a happy face for fear of playing into the rampant prejudices that assumed that our parents, my parents, and their ability to be parents was somehow not good enough. As I grew older, I think I started to realise that no one should have to prove that they're normal in order to be seen as equal. And I started to realise that I wasn't doing any justice to my queer family to simply assert my normacy. It was also important to express the richness of our differences. Normal ignores the very qualities that make my family what it is. A family created and sustained by the courage and love of two strong women who refused to let conventional wisdom dictate who and how they would love. While we all experience the same banal, frustrating commonalities of family life, I think what might be more interesting is to talk to you a little bit about all that I'm proud to say is different. So kids in our families, we're not created by accident. So we're raised from an early age knowing that our parents fought for the right to have us, and we are really wanted. I think that's a pretty cool start to life. In our homes, biology is not an essential ingredient. Instead, a family is foremost the people who raise you and the community that you create. When most kids are grappling with the idea of man plus woman equals baby, we're able to verbalize complex reproductive technology. We're fluent in the language of IVF, and we know that conception can involve more than two people. I remember being hoisted on my mum's shoulders and being cheered all the way up Oxford Street in celebration and protest of our rights. One year we dressed up as Japanese geisha, and the other year we were a 70s rock band that held placards that said, "Daddy who, Mummy too." And I'm definitely not the only kid. I was definitely the only kid at school that year that got to ride on the lead float of the Mardi Gras. I think it's at lots of schools today, there's actually a lot of social capital from having gay parents. Us queer-parented kids have a community around us. We're not simply the traditional extended family, but the expanded family, often comprising of 2, 3, or 4 parents, as well as donor fathers, surrogate mothers, and any number of donor siblings. We might have butch dyke mums or camp dads, and this exposure to non-traditional gender roles often carries with it an awareness and appreciation of gender identity, which I think is a really positive force throughout our lives. When puberty hits, Gaybys are generally more open and fearless when it comes to exploring our sexuality. In our house, I knew that if I brought back a man or a woman, it would be okay. When I asked Brenna, who's actually one of the kids we used to research in the beginning of the film, at 11, whether she thought she might have boyfriends or girlfriends, she said, "My sexuality is a glowing, changeable ball that is discovering what form it wants to take." It's very advanced. Most kids from queer families have an inherent resilience that rises from experiencing some form of discrimination, and it's vastly unrecognised that we have to come out for our families too. My friend Raj, who lives out in the Bible Belt of Sydney in the early 80s, he spent his entire schooling avoiding having friends back to his house. His mothers had reason to believe that in the area they lived in, their kids would be vulnerable and unsafe if they lived out. So Raj and his brother Jesse told the outside world that they had a mother and an auntie, and that was for the full 12 years of his schooling. I think the film that Charlotte and I have made really doesn't shy away from revealing some of these differences, and it also doesn't shy away from revealing the imperfections that I might have covered up in my younger years, because our families aren't perfect. What family is, and I think that, our families are no less perfect than any other type of family. So I think at this point, now that I've rambled on a lot, it would be really nice to introduce you to the film that we've made and let you meet some of these kids, Graham, Matt, Ebony, and Gus. They're really amazing. Should we sit?
I don't know, anyone who has a family like mine.
Same-sex couples cannot simultaneously provide both mothering and fathering skills that a child desperately needs.
I really want to get into Newtown. It'd probably be the place where I'd most be accepted. I am on the long road to puberty when you become a man.
I think it's okay to lie about having 2 dads.
My mom has told me about the priest at church telling us that mom is sin against God. It's not normal, you're not normal. The kind of things which go around my head. But I don't really know when you're manly. Personally, I think that God made everyone to be who they are.
Can you go to wrestling?
Yeah, when it comes to Australia, please. I wasn't that accepting at first.
I worry that you start thinking that that's the way that you be an interesting man.
You could say things like, I'm this tall and I weigh this much.
And I have 2 dads.
We really do disagree on something important to both of us.
Kids sometimes can come up with better ideas than adults.
You look so old.
What, you want me to look 6 again?
That'd be good.
The people who raised you and make you who you are today are your family. Not all good things in life come easy.
So, the film is actually in cinemas right now. So, if you liked the trailer, head on over to the Nova. It's actually been a really long journey making this film. We've been making it for 5 years. We're in our early 20s when we started. We're now in our late 20s. We have a lot less energy now. I found a grey hair in Maya's head the other day. But, you know, we have learnt and grown a lot over that time. From being 22 and believing that stories could change the world to being 27, releasing a film and promptly getting it banned, which is what has happened recently in a bit of controversy in New South Wales, and we'll talk about that in a minute. When we started making this film, I was, you know, this total artsy film nerd, but I don't think I really thought that much about who was behind the films that I was watching so avidly. And it wasn't until I came to making my own films that I realised most of them were made by these old white men. And they were also funded by old white men and distributed by old white men. And I don't know, I think that's kind of shocking considering films form such a huge part of how we process and understand the world. You know, I think when all of the narratives we're being fed come from a tiny select group of individuals, you have to ask yourself, are those narratives really reflecting our lives? Are we getting the whole picture? And for someone like me who was raised by heterosexual parents, you know, I think we take for granted the expectation of seeing heterosexual family units in the media. You know, that's what we see everywhere, and that image becomes the expectation rather than the reality. And as a consequence, other kinds of families, including same-sex attracted families, are deemed maybe less valid. So the driving question for me has become, how can we as filmmakers challenge the status quo and tell stories that more accurately reflect our lives and the world around us and what matters to us? With Gayby, we knew what we wanted to do and we knew why it mattered. We just had $0, no idea how to make the vision of this film a reality, and not really much experience. So where do you go from there? How do you get your idea off the ground? Thankfully, it was 2012 and crowdfunding had just arrived in Australia. I actually had no idea what crowdfunding was. It sounded illegal and like a lot of hard work. But, you know, we were advised that, you know, because the film straddled a lot of hot topics and, you know, and had this great audience, that it would be really perfect for crowdfunding. For the record, it's not illegal, but it is a lot of hard work. We proceeded to spend 2 frantic months calling every LGBTIQ, gender diverse, rainbow, queer organisation we had ever heard of and asking them if they would please support our campaign. And look, not everyone got back to us, but the people who did were 100% on board from that day till today. And they were there and they believed in the film and they believed what we had always thought, which was that it was really important. They even stood by us when we hijacked ABC's Q&A with T-shirts that had the crowdfunding campaign, like, hand-drawn across the chest. They even stood by us through that. And I think that's a lesson actually in change-making right there. I mean, break the rules so long as you're on the right side of history. So I guess in the crowdfunding campaign, suddenly we found our champions. We raised over $100,000 in 6 weeks, which was more than any documentary had made in crowdfunding at that time, maybe still, actually, I'm not sure. And of course, from there, we went on to raise money in more conventional ways. We had wonderful support from a number of philanthropic organisations and, of course, Green Australia. But those those first supporters were really, really vital. The film has become theirs as much as ours. I mean, they made this idea in our heads a reality by believing in it. And I think a lot of people undervalue how important your first supporters are. Without their goodwill and encouragement, we might not have had the energy to go on at that critical moment. And so I guess my heart, and I never know if there's anyone in the audience who supported us, my heart still beats with gratitude for those people. So, at that point we were able to get the film off the ground, which was really terribly exciting. But making the film was only one part of the story. As the volume increased on the marriage equality debate over those years, we came to feel like the film might offer reason in balance in that rather ugly conversation. And we also saw gaps in the education system of the kids we were filming. For example, Rory, who is Gus's younger sister, she started kindergarten, and her teacher wanted to do a lesson about the life cycle, and she did this with hens and roosters and little eggs, and handed around eggs and said, well, you need a hen and a rooster to make this egg. One of Rory's classmates puts up their hand and says, Miss, that's not true, because Rory's here and she's got two mums. And the teacher just sort of was quite shocked and silenced by that, and didn't really know how to continue that conversation or where to go from there. So she just didn't. She kind of ignored it and moved on. Rory, consequently, delightfully spent the next 2 weeks teaching all of her kindergarten classmates about IVF and donors. But I guess the point to be made there is that the teacher wasn't homophobic, and probably on the contrary, and most teachers are not. But in ignoring that simple question, she made Rory do the work. And I just don't think that children, particularly that age, should have to be the experts in the classroom. So we had all these ideas around how Gayby Baby could be used by our policymakers and educators, and how the film could be more than a film, that it could be a movement. So on one hand, we wanted to release the film, but on the other, we also wanted to use it for good. Now, in filmmaking, that is quite a radical idea. There is typically a way things are done, where you release the film, maybe it goes to cinemas for a documentary, maybe it doesn't, and then eventually, it goes on sale at a DVD shop and ends up in SBS archives, eventually collecting dust. That's the end. And we didn't really like hearing that, so we decided to do things a different way. We took part in an event called The Good Pitch, which is all about connecting social impact documentary to the philanthropic and not-for-profit sector, and we got to pitch all of our ideas, big and small, of how we felt the film could be used to raise the visibility of same-sex attracted families across a number of areas like social outreach, policy and education. And, through Good Pitch, it's kind of like the big sister to crowdfunding. We were able to kind of find the next cohort of champions for the film who would help us see this next phase through, and we're in the crux of that right now. And they're really helping us push this film to its absolute limits.
Yeah, so with the policy change stuff, we were really excited, because I think that we're obviously in the midst of this national debate, and we really wanted to transform the marriage equality debate from one that's just about gay couples to one that includes families and kids. And so we have done a number of sort of parliamentary screenings over the last couple of months, and then it will continue to ongoing. And one really cool event that I just wanted to quickly mention was that we brought 7 adults who were raised in same-sex families from each state around the country, and we brought them to federal parliament, and we hosted a panel discussion with our MPs and senators to let them know, it was kind of like a storytelling event, really, and everyone, these kids and adults, talked about what it was like to grow up with same-sex parents. And what was really fantastic was that we had a number of MPs stand up in Parliament and make speeches on the floor about how moved they were about this experience. MP Andrew Giles said, "It's one thing for someone to support a matter in principle, another entirely to understand how such a principle affects people's lives. What unites families is love." And it was a really beautiful moment. I think as well, at the same time, what we've managed to do, I suppose, is that through the Good Pitch and through all these partnerships that we've made, when there was a little bit of controversy around a film a few weeks ago, it meant that it wasn't just Charlotte and I, like, standing there behind the cameras defending our little documentary and being like, yeah, it's good, it's worth something. We actually had Senator Penny Wong, we had Human Rights Commission, Tim Wilson, we had Alex Greenwich debating on the project on national TV, we had all sorts of huge Safe Schools Coalition standing up and defending this film and talking about its value in Australian society. And that is really, I think, where we saw the fruits of all of our outreach work.
Yeah, so, I mean, just briefly, in case anyone isn't aware of what happened, we had planned to have a preview screening of Gayby Baby the week before it came out in cinemas on Wear It Purple Day, which is a wonderful day of celebration of diversity in schools, and it's youth-led. Fantastic. We thought that was kind of a great melding of two projects coming together, and then the Daily Telegraph picked up this story and splashed it on the front of the newspaper with the headline, Gay Class Uproar. And they said that the film was not appropriate to be used in this way, to be watched in schools. And we were pretty shocked and upset by that. Like, that was so not what we thought this film was. You know, for anyone who's actually seen the film, it's not very political.
It's also PG.
It's PG. And yeah, so we were quite upset, but I guess coming through that, and as Maya said, we had so many people who came out in support afterwards to defend the film. But what it crystallised for me is that sometimes change is ugly. And so even though we were like devastated by the attack on gay families, I now feel really sure that it's opened a very important conversation. You know, Gaybies exist and their difference is beautiful. And I suppose thinking about the family I was raised in and the families I've met making this film, I'm thinking about the future, right? And I think, or I hope rather, that we're coming to a time where kids from same-sex attracted families will no longer feel it's necessary to explain that their family is just like anyone else's in order to be seen as equal. I hope that all of us as a country of families have the courage to look at same-sex attracted families and see what they get so right. I think we all have a lot to learn. Thanks.